Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Ajani and Job come to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we're going to be taking a look at a standard deck, and it is Bant Enchantments. So for you guys that are unfamiliar with what Bant is, it is a color combination of green, white, and blue. And previously in other seasons of standard play in Magic the Gathering, we've seen enchantment decks, and they've been cool. It was a cool concept. They were fairly aggressive. And now that Return to Ravnica is out, we have a lot of really interesting and cool and pretty powerful enchantments that we can work around to having this very unique deck. It's definitely very unique, very competitive, so we're going to break it down here today. But if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below, and be sure to check out the playlist in the description where I have the previous decks that I've covered archived, so be sure to check that out. But the first thing that we are going to take a look at here is the land base for the decks. So we have 22 lands here, starting off with Temple Garden. So we have our shock lands for this deck, and we're going to take advantage of them, all of the ones that we have. So Temple Garden is going to be a play set for us. I'm going to put those up there. From there, we have Hallowed Fountain. So we're going to be running a play set of the Fountain. From there, we have Hinterland Harbor. So this one's going to be providing green or blue. So play set of that. From there, we have Sunpetal Grove. So we're only running 3 of these. So 3 Sun Petals. And then we have Glacial Fortress. So Glacial Fortress is going to be a 3 of as well. And then we just have our basics. So we're running 4 basic forests. So that's the land base, 24 lands. And now we're going to just kind of delve into the rest of the stuff here. So we have our creatures in ascending order. So first off, we have Avacyn's Pilgrim. So 1 green, 1/1 taps for 1 white mana to our mana pool. So he's definitely really nice on turn 1, giving us the opportunity to play a 3-cost card on turn 2, like Geist of St. Traft or Ajani, Caller of the Pride. But Avacyn's Pilgrim ramps us up a little bit. So we're running a play set of the Pilgrim. From there, we have Invisible Stalker. So Invisible Stalker is a 1/1 for 2, 1 generic and 1 blue. He has hexproof, so he can't be targeted, and he can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. And he is unblockable, so whenever he's swinging in, he's going to be unanswered. So we have a playset of Invisible Stalker. From there, we have Geist of St. Traft, so 2/2 for 3 mana, 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 blue. He has hexproof, and whenever he attacks, put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So after that, exile it at the end of combat. But Geist of St. Traft is really awesome, especially if you're able to play him like turn 2, swing turn 3. And stuff like that, and he definitely outraces a lot of slower decks. So we have playset of Geist of St. Traft, and the Invisible Stalker and Geist of St. Traft are both really nice cards to have early on, just because hexproof is very relevant, and it's a lot harder for your opponent to deal with than traditional creatures where they don't have hexproof, and your opponent can just use some sort of removal element on them. But from there, we have Sigarda, Host of Herons. So we're just running a one of Sigarda. So she's a 5/5 for 5, 2 generic, 1 green, double white. Flying, hexproof, and spells and abilities your opponent's control can't cause you to sacrifice permanents. So she's really nice up against mid-range decks, mainly Jund mid-range, because they don't really have very many ways to actually deal with her. She's pretty balanced. She's a 5/5 for 5 with flying, which makes her very balanced, and the hexproof just pushes her over the top, and it just makes her really strong, just because you can throw on enchantments on her and just be able to bash in for a lot of damage. So We're running one Sigarda. We don't want to have too many really expensive cards because we are running a 22 land deck, so we're trying to play off of as many cheap things as we can. From there, we have Ajani, Caller of the Pride. So he originally started out as Silverblade Paladin, but then I started playing with Ajani, and I liked Ajani a little bit better. So Ajani is a 3-cost Planeswalker, one generic and double white. His +1 puts a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature. -3 gives a creature flying and double strike until the end of the turn. And -8 puts X amount of 2/2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is your life total. So Johnny's definitely really nice. The +1 is very relevant in making creatures bigger, but the -3 is even more relevant, especially if you have a Rancor on one of your creatures already. But I mean, he's just so good. Ajani is very good in this type of a deck, and we are running 3 of him just to be able to make our stuff bigger, a little bit more threatening, a little bit more resilient to stuff like Bonfire of the Damned. Obviously, Supreme Verdict is a problem, but we can still play around stuff like that. We still have enough aggressive elements to where we can just play another copy of said card, like Geist, Traft, or something else like that, and just be able to kind of catch up and just bash in for more. So from there, we have Selesnya Charm. So we're running 3 Selesnya Charms in the deck. So Selesnya Charm is 1 green and 1 white. Choose one target creature gets +2/+2 and trample until the end of the turn. Exile target creature with power 5 or greater. So stuff like Angel of Serenity, Thragtusk, Thundermaw, Hellkite. Selesnya Charm becomes a removal element against them. Or put a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance on the battlefield. So Selesnya Charm is versatile. That's why it's really good. And we have 3 of them. So if we need the removal, we can use it as a removal. We can use it as a combat trick to give a creature +2/+2 and trample. And we can also use it just to get another token and a body that's going to swing. So from there, we have our enchantments in the deck. So first off, we have Rancor. So it's a 1 green enchantment, and it enchants a creature and gives it +2/+0 and trample. And if Rancor is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. So if the creature you have enchanted with Rancor ends up dying or is exiled or something like that, the Rancor is just going to end up back in your hand, which is really nice. So playset of Rancor. From there, we have Ethereal Armor. So Ethereal Armor is a 1 white enchantment and enchants a creature, and it gives it +1/+1 for each enchantment we control, and it also gives it first strike, which just kind of pushes it up and over the top. So Ethereal Armor, very, very strong in just being able to play up against other aggro-type decks. And it's just tremendous, giving a creature both power and toughness, and giving you a overall benefit with the first strike is very, very powerful for that 1 white that it just costs. So Ethereal Armor as a playset. From there, we have Abundant Growth. So it's a 1 green enchantment, and it enchants a land. Whenever Abundant Growth enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, which is nice. So it's essentially like cycling for us for 1 mana. And the enchanted land taps for any 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So it's, in a small sense, going to at least let us fix a little bit and be able to appropriately play the things that we have. So we have a playset Abundant Growth to be able to both draw a little bit and to also fix our mana. But the mana problems shouldn't be too often. The mana base is fairly solid. From there, we have Spectral Flight. So Spectral Flight is a 2-cost enchantment, 1 generic and 1 blue. And it gives enchanted creature +2/+2 and flying. So being able to give a creature flying could potentially set it up as being a little bit better than anything your opponent has, because they might not have flying creatures to actually be able to block. So Spectral Flight oftentimes just gets there, especially on stuff like Geist, Traft. If your opponent doesn't have any flying blockers, so you're able to swing in unanswered with both the Geist and his 4/4 angel that he's going to produce. But Spectral Flight is another easy way to make creatures really big. And then the last card that we have here in the deck, the last enchantment, is Detention Sphere. So we're running 3 of these, and it's an enchantment for 3, 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 blue. And when it enters the battlefield, we can exile target non-land permanent not named Detention Sphere and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. And whenever Detention Sphere leaves the battlefield, we return all the exiled cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So Detention Sphere is nice, and it's able to get rid of threats, things that we can't necessarily deal with or trade with our creatures. So planeswalkers, big bulky creatures, anything that just seems to be a nuisance. But the deck is fairly straightforward. It doesn't require a whole lot of knowledge in piloting it. Once you start playing it a little bit, playtesting with it, you kind of get the feel for it, and you understand what hands you can keep, what are unfavorable hands when you should mulligan, and stuff like that. So that's the main board. Now we're going to take a look at the sideboard. So for the sideboard here, we have, first off, Feeling of Dread. So Feeling of Dread is a nice common from Innistrad that we can take advantage of, and we're running 2 of them in the sideboard, and it's a instant speed card as well, which makes it very nice. So 1 generic and 1 white, tap up to 2 target creatures, and it has a flashback for 2 as well, 1 generic and 1 blue. So Feeling of Dread is nice if your opponent plays a creature and they pass turn. At the end of their turn, you're able to Feeling of Dread, tap down their creatures, and you can swing unanswered. So it's a nice little trick with that. It also has the flashback cost, which means you can use each copy twice. Well, at least hopefully twice. But it buys you a little bit of time. It gives you some cheap ways to swing in unanswered. And Feeling of Dread is definitely really nice up against other aggro-heavy decks. Mainly stuff that we can't necessarily get rid of their creatures with, stuff like Selesnya Charm. As far as the ability goes, where if it's 5 power or greater, we can exile it. But Feeling of Dread is a nice way to keep your opponent's creatures tapped down and make sure that we're swinging in effectively each turn. So, Feeling of Dread. From there, we have Night of Glory. So, Night of Glory is a playset in our sideboard, and it's a 2/1 creature with protection from black for 1 generic and 1 white, and it also has Exalted. So, if a creature is attacking alone, it gets a +1/+1 buff. So, Night of Glory is really nice up against zombie builds, anything that's really heavy black. Just the protection from black is the reason why we want to have it in our sideboard up against any of those decks that are going to be running a lot of creatures like Gravecrawler, Drawf's Messengers, creatures of that nature. So we have a playset of Night of Glory in the side for black heavy aggro decks. From there, we have Azorius Charm. So Azorius Charm is a 2 of in our sideboard. So Azorius Charm sides in sometimes against aggro whenever we need the life gain back. For 1 generic, or not 1 generic, 1 white and 1 blue, we get to choose 1 creatures we control, gain lifelink until the end of the turn, or we can draw a card, or we can put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So with Azorius Charm, if we have a big creature, we're able to give it lifelink and be able to gain back a sizable chunk of life up against other aggro, burn type decks, anything like that. So that's definitely one of the biggest benefits to actually running Azorius Charm. But it's another charm that's very versatile. It has multiple uses. So pretty much whenever you see an optimal use out of it, you can side in something that's a little bit worse than it game 2 and be able to benefit from running the charm. From there, we have Rest in Peace. So we're running 3 Rest in Peace in the sideboard. So it's a 1 generic and 1 white, and whenever Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards. If a token or a card would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So we have Rest in Peace up against Reanimator decks, just because Reanimator decks can be fairly fast in being able to get their cards in their graveyard and then use Unburial Rites as well. So we want to kind of stop them by using Rest in Peace. And it's also another enchantment as well, so it's going to power up stuff like Ethereal Armor. But Rest in Peace is definitely very strong up against Reanimator builds. Also builds that are using Runechanter's Pike as kind of like a win condition. So 3 Rest in Peace. From there we have Negate, so we're running 3 Negates in the sideboard. So counter target non-creature spell for 2 mana, 1 generic and 1 blue. So good up against a lot of different matchups, mid-range decks, also control decks, anything that runs a lot of non-creature spells. And then we have Essence Scatter. So Essence Scatter is the last card, and it's counter target creature spell for 1 generic and 1 blue. And Essence Scatter is nice up against Thragtusks, Thundermaw, Hellkites, Angel of Serenities, anything that seems to be very, very good against us and is troublesome. Mainly Thragtusk. Thragtusk is really huge. They gain back life. That's very unfortunate. So we have the Essence Scatter. It sides in against a lot of different decks, but it's definitely really nice up against Reanimator type builds because you already have the Rest in Peace that you have to solve their reanimation combos, and then you have your Essence Scatter that's going to let you counter whenever they're actually casting one of their creatures. So that is Bant Enchantments. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can check out this deck. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. And as always, thank you guys for watching and have a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.